Before we move into our post entities, I do gotta point out one small tiny little thing. We again forgot to commit. Sorry about that, guys.
I
Um,
totally blame me.
yeah, I'm blaming Steve right now.
Nelson did put me in as a stopgap, and I have failed miserably at that.
I do promise that like on local projects, I do seriously commit like after every feature or so. But you know when you're, it's just yeah, stuff and things. You know what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Al-
It's why I fail. I'm sure of it.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started and work on our posts. Now, our posts are going to be a very important aspect to our blog because it's a blog. There's not a whole lot more to say about that.
And they have posts.
They do have posts and they have tags. So we're actually going to create two entities, two mappings, and two tables in this video to get the database ready to handle our posts and our tags.
Sweet, let's do it.
All right, let's start with our post class. Our post class can have a public virtual int ID. It's going to have a public virtual user. That's going to be an interesting one because we want to know who wrote the post. A public virtual string title. We're going to have a public virtual string slug. We'll talk about that. We'll have a public virtual string content. Then we're going to have a public virtual date time. This is going to bring in using system at the top. Created at. A public virtual date time nullable updated at. And a public virtual date time nullable deleted at. Then we're going to have a public virtual boolean is deleted, which is going to be set to return deleted at does not equal null. Or sorry, yes, that's what it is.
All right, we got a lot of work to do.
All right, so let's go over these properties. We have an ID, that's pretty straightforward. And then we have a user. We're going to use nHibernate to map our post to our user, which is going to be awesome. Then we have a title and content. That should be very self-explanatory. The slug is going to be a specialized title that is designed for use with URLs. That's because Google and most search engines look at the title of a URL or the URL of a site or a page above most other things. And we want to make sure to get the title somehow into our URL. However, not all characters that are valid in a title are valid in a URL. So we actually have to go out and write a custom title that only allows the characters that are specific to URLs. Next up, we have the created at and updated at. Those should be straightforward. Those are timestamps for when this post was created and the last time it was updated. But finally, we also have deleted at. And that's because I'm implementing a technique known as soft deletion. Soft deletion is where you mark an object or a row in a database as being deleted, but you don't actually physically remove it just quite yet. That way, we can actually view posts that have been trashed in the admin, but they won't appear on the front end because they'll be marked as deleted. The isDeleted property is just a convenience property that says if deleted at is not null, return true, because it's considered to be deleted. I'm also going to go ahead and create our post mapping. So post map, class mapping, post. Okay, so most of this stuff you should already be familiar with. I'm just going to go really quickly through all of the properties except for user, because user is going to have some special considerations. So let's start off with the table is going to be posts, which doesn't exist yet. We're going to create the migrations here in a moment. Then we're going to have a property of title, which is going to be not nullable. Then we're going to have a slug and a content, which are also not nullable. It's not nullable true. So we'll have a slug and a content. Then we're going to have a created at. Now created at is going to be fun because created at has the name created underscore at. And it also is not nullable. Same with updated at, updated at and deleted at are both going to be nullable, so we don't have to open up a multi-line lambda. So I'm simply going to say x.updated at with a column name of updated underscore at, and then I'm going to create the deleted at. Now, I'm not going to map the isDeleted because isDeleted isn't actually mapped to the database. Instead, it's just a convenience member that is on top of our post. So we're not mapping it.
All right.
So let's talk about the user. How do we map a user? How do we tell the nHibernate that every post is owned by a user? Well, we're going to create a unidirectional association between post and user. And to do that, we just have to edit our post map to contain a many-to-one association between posts and users. Not surprisingly, we actually do that with many-to-one. We point it at the user, and then we open up a multi-line lambda. The multi-line lambda is going to say x column, and that's going to be user ID. And then we're going to say x not nullable. We'll set that to true. Now, we don't have to tell nHibernate what table we're going to retrieve the user data from, because nHibernate infers it from the type. Because it knows a user is a user. We see that on line 9. And it knows that the user is mapped to the user's table. The only thing we have to tell nHibernate is every post will have a user ID column, which will point to a user.
That makes perfect sense.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and do tags now. Let me come in here. I'm going to write a tag class. The tag class is going to be public virtual int ID with a public virtual string slug and a public virtual string name. Then we're going to have a tag map. Of tag. We're going to open up its constructor. I don't think I actually, on my post, I don't think I mapped my ID. If we see here, we never actually mapped our ID column. I'm going to go ahead and do that real fast. It's going to be the exact same as all the other IDs. It's simply going to be ID goes into X ID, and then X generators identity.
All right, so the same thing. Great.
Now remember, this is bringing in a bunch of these using statements up top, but ReSharper and our Visual Studio will tell you exactly which ones are missing. So going back into tag, let's do the table. Again, tags doesn't exist yet. Then we'll do the ID. Then we're going to do the property. Then we're going to do slug. So this is all well and good, but we're missing one thing. We're missing the association between tag and posts. I wanted to wait till I had both of these classes stubbed out before I did that. Just like what we did with user, where user has a many-to-many relationship with roles, so do tags with posts. We implement that a bidirectional many-to-many with a public virtual iList of the other object. So as you see here, we have a public virtual list of posts. We'll do the same thing on posts in a second for tags. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and map the tag to the posts in a many-to-many fashion. So we have our key. Now, if you recall, the key is the column that refers to the entity we're mapping from when we're doing many-to-manys, which is tag ID. Then we have the table. The table is going to be post tags. That's going to be the pivot table that we will create in our migration. Next up, we have to specify it as a many-to-many, and then we have to go ahead and specify the column. So, make sense?
Yep, doing good so far.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this bag definition, and I'm going to jump over to posts. Now I'm going to add the relationship on the post side. To do that, I need a public virtual iList, which brings in system collections generic, of tag called tags. Then I'm going to scroll all the way down to the end of the post mapping, and I'm going to paste this in, and I'm going to just change the parameters that need to be changed. Really, all that needs to be changed is things need to be inverted. I'm simply going to map tags instead of posts. Tag ID becomes post ID, and post ID becomes tag ID. The table
Very
remains
nice.
the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are our entities. Let's go ahead and create our migration. So our migration is actually going to update the database to have the tables that we just mapped to. To do that, I'm going to go into the migrations folder, and I'm going to create a new class underscore 002 posts and tags. Now I have to do two things for the migration. I first have to have the migration attribute with the value 2, and then I have to have it inherit from the migration class. When I have it inherit from the migration class, of course, I have to implement the two abstract members, up and down. So let's go ahead and think about this. If I move this off to the side here, and then I'm going to hit Control Alt Shift Enter. Whoops, there we go. Alt Shift Enter to go full screen. We can now look at both the entity and the tables at the same time, so we can kind of match them up in the way we want. So let's go ahead and create a table called posts. It's going to have a column ID that is the primary key, or sorry, the identity, or sorry, it's as int32, primary key, identity. Then it's going to have a column user ID as int32 with a foreign key relationship to the users table on the ID column. Remember, we want to make sure that we maintain referential integrity. Okay?
Okay. Sounding good.
So, next up, we need our title. Our title will be as string 128. Oops. Then we'll create our slug. Our slug will be as string 128. Oops. Then we're going to go ahead and create our created at. So with column created at as date time. Then we'll create our column updated at. Now updated at will be a date time, but it's also going to be nullable. Now remember, Fluent and Hibernate will default to not nullable columns. So when we want something to be nullable, we have to explicitly say .nullable. Then we want our deleted at. Our deleted at will be an as date time, and it'll be nullable as well.
Perfect.
That's actually all we need to do. We have our entire entity now represented in this table. Now remember, there's nothing about tags yet because we haven't created the pivot table yet. So now let's go into tags and let's create the tag table. This should be a little bit easier. I'm going to say create table tags with column ID as int32 primary key dot identity. Then I'm going to say with column slug as string 128 with column name as string 128, and that is literally all that we need in the tags table.
Nice.
Now we need to create the pivot table. So I'm going to say create table post tags, which remember is this right here. Then I'm going to say with column tag ID as int32 foreign key on the tags table with ID. I also want to set its cascade. So we'll say on delete rule.cascade. That's because if the user deletes a role or the role somehow gets deleted, we'll want to delete the association it has with its tags. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great. I even understand the whole post tags thing, and this is awesome.
Great. So now we'll go ahead and create the post ID column, which will basically be the same. The only difference is that we're creating a foreign key constraint on the posts table instead of the tags table.
Alrighty.
So this is our database schema. So let's go ahead and write the down. The down is going to delete the table post tags first. It has to delete this first because the post tags table has relationships to the other two tables.
Just like the last time we set it up.
Yep. So now we can delete posts and delete tags in any order we want because now there's nothing that relates them.
All right. That's very nice.
Before I run this migration, I don't want to forget to do one last thing, and that is to make nHibernate aware of our two new class mappings, our tag and our post. So I'm going to close out of all of these files. I'm going to open up my database class. I'm going to scroll down to my mappings, and I'm going to say mapper add mapping tag map mapper add mapping post map. Then I'll hit F6 and I'll come back to the site and hit refresh. The reason I'm doing this is even though we're not actually using post or tags anywhere, nHibernate will still give me an error. Oh, hold on, let me log in again. nHibernate will still actually give me an error if I somehow messed up my mappings when it loads. So by coming in here, hitting refresh, it's kind of a sanity check to make sure that we didn't mess up our mappings too bad. Okay, now we have to run our migration, because our migration hasn't been ran on our database yet. Remember our nice little tools folder?
Absolutely.
So we're going to open up our tools folder, and we're simply going to double click on deploy db-dev. Window pops up, window goes away. We're going to open up MySQL Workbench and see what it did. We now have 3 new tables.
Excellent.
Post tags, post, and tags. Now if I look at version info, we'll see that version 2 was applied. So now the database migrator knows that version 2 has already been applied and it won't reapply it again. Alrighty, look good?
Yeah, this looks good.
Okay, so I just wanted to figure out our migrations and our models. So let's go ahead and commit and we'll wrap up the video. I'm going to go ahead and commit all these changes, stage them, and commit them, and I'll say created post tag model and migration, or post tagged models and migration. Hit commit, and I think that just about wraps everything up.
Awesome. That was great. Let's move on.